I suppose we could, because someone put it on their television.
I don't know.
Can't you screen it on your telly?
It depends on your telly.
Well, yeah, we got
I
one there.
could put mine on the TV. I can mirror it, but it won't help you.
If you've got the ability to cast it to your TV, yeah.
No, that's no good, is it?
Hang on, we're still planning. Carry on. This is battery flat. This battery flat. Talk amongst yourselves. I've got to.
And that is.
Hello.
Hi, Sylvia.
Hello,
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Sylvia.
Hello. Happy New Year.
Down to you.
We're back in
Book up. So solid and heavy.
That's no good, is it?
I wouldn't have it. We'll try it.
Well, I
The back seat then and drive from here.
Hello. Hello, Cynthia.
Hello, Jean. Hello, David.
Hi.
We're in.
We're in.
Yeah.
You're doing well, Jean.
Yeah, doing well now.
Yeah,
View
I
screen with-
can see a lot more now.
Well, you just switch that off, don't you?
I don't know which you are.
Oh.
In my head.
Hello, Anne.
Hello. Hello, Paul. Hey, David and Jean.
Hello, man.
There's no June Cox, though, is there?
No, they're not doing it,
Do
are
you
they?
get any more?
Christine. Hello, Christine.
Hello.
Hello, John and Sue.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, that's Anne, isn't it? Anne Crabtree, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
That's me. Yeah, waving.
Oh.
Hello, Caroline. Alan.
We've got some blank ones. No, we haven't.
No, you haven't. It takes a while for them to come up with.
Roger and
This,
Kath.
you know, it's so wonderful having this COVID, isn't it? Because we could all do this and not have to pay any money out. Just stop at home.
Bob and Sue, good evening. Jeff and Sue.
Good evening.
Hello, Joe.
Steve.
Oh yeah.
Anne.
Hello, Carol. Yes.
Gillian and Anne won't be coming, obviously, while we've got the lockdown.
But wouldn't the car start?
Hi, Steve.
Hi
They
Paul.
send their regards.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. I'll put
Happy
them
New Year
down.
to you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
They send their New Year wishes to everybody.
Yes.
Another light in front of it.
When he wants to start off.
Light your face up.
Carol.
Yeah.
Cynthia.
Hello, everyone.
Dee.
Or
just clap on the screen. Clap on the screen.
Maureen and Dave. No, Harry.
I'm fine, no, I'm fine. I'll just
Everybody
control it
okay,
from here.
are they?
Hi, Anne. Yeah.
Everybody's staying well as expected.
Splendid.
Yeah.
Oh, that's Sylvia now, is it?
Yeah.
Is that Sylvia and Jeff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can't you move this up then and change it in there then? Doesn't it go into there?
It should do.
Oh, is the old git playing up again?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just talking that. When's JR's funeral?
Don't know.
Oh, okay.
Connecting to Richard.
Oh.
Richard's iPad.
Yeah.
You probably won't get it until Sylvia does her talk, and she'll be on the full screen then, probably.
Right, go on.
Yes.
Irene, did you get my email?
Yes, thank you. I've answered you.
Oh, have you? Oh, I haven't looked at that. Did it make any difference?
Yes, but just
Well, I'm glad we've not got to turn out tonight.
Oh, yes.
Oh, it's awful here.
Yeah, thank you for the pen, Irene. I did need it because David hadn't got one.
you're welcome.
And looking out at the back over towards Shalford, Lutterworth Road that way, it looks even worse. It looks really.
Have you got snow?
Have you got
snow?
We haven't been
No,
out.
not really. No, it's like a hoar frost sort of thing.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trevor and
Have
Eileen.
you got any, Joe?
I think it's because
rumours
everybody,
tomorrow.
it's
Yeah,
new people
just
joining,
flood.
I think.
Trevor and Eileen.
Well, I don't know.
Evening.
Yeah.
Where have you gone, Bob? I don't know where Bob's gone. Is he?
Oh, a bit too much. Not bad turnout. Do you think we should start?
Oh yes, we're making.
Yeah.
We've got the ingredients here. Just carry on.
Right.
Which one's Sylvia?
She's back further along there now.
Oh,
What's that?
oh. That wasn't somebody else coming in, was it?
Oh, I don't know.
No, she's no 7th of January.
Oh,
Right,
that's,
they're the notices. Yeah.
Can't read that.
no, wait,
Oh, a minute.
oh,
There you go.
oh, here we are.
Okay.
Right, you're right now.
Okay. Right then. Shall we make a start?
Absolutely.
Go on
Well, thank you for all for making the effort to turn up tonight.
Right.
Bring out to the
I hope you all got some suitable refreshment with you.
Cold out. Always.
Yeah, it is. It's good. This is one time when I'm glad we're in anyway. So we'll start with the notices. As you know, deep regret that we've got to announce the passing of two of our founder members, JR, John Robbins, and Marlene Barnett. Marlene died, I think it was about the 2nd of January. She'd been in hospital for a few days. You probably remember Don and Marlene from the earlier days when they used to come, they lived on Freeman's Lane, they used to come over to the group quite a lot. But of course in recent years Marlene's not been able to get out. But she's a lovely lady and she'll be sadly missed. One of the kindest, gentlest people I've ever met, Marlene was. And well, JR, well, we all knew JR, of course.
That better.
I was thinking about all the different jobs and roles he'd done with Heritage right from about 2002. And I think, I can sum it up by probably saying he was probably our greatest ambassador. Anywhere you went, you'd be out to shop.
Oh, I see.
He'd always.
Excuse me,
mention
Sylvia.
his Heritage group.
Excuse me. Somebody keeps talking and I can't hear you.
Yeah, could you please put your things on mute? That's on mute, please, while I'm speaking. That would be lovely. I love you joining in, but sometimes it is a bit distracting.
I'm quiet, I think.
Yeah, thank you. And well, anyway, second item. As for John's funeral, John and Sue, I'm sorry, with no dates yet. I'd imagine at the moment they're taking quite a long time. Yeah. But as soon as I know anything, I'll let you know. There's been absolutely nothing done at the moment. I know there's not. From his sons have been in, well, a little bit of contact with us.
Well, I suspect there'll be 30 there anyway.
Yeah, you're allowed 30, yeah. But definitely I'll let you know. Everybody knows as soon as we know. Newsletter. Ideas, please. So we're continuing to produce a monthly newsletter whilst it's possible. And it's good to keep in touch with all those who are not on the internet. Not that there's that many who aren't, but it's good to do anyway. And we keep managing to produce things, but anything's always welcome. Ideas or articles, pictures, anything. And sometimes it just kick off an idea for one of us to write an article or something, even if you don't feel you can do it yourselves. We've got coming up in February the 26th, it's the 100th anniversary of the War Memorial opening. And the committee's been talking about probably producing something actually on the day online again at the moment about that on the centenary, and then hopefully something live later on in the year. And I've got quite a few pictures of the opening of the War Memorial, but there's one thing that I can't get, and that's the opening order of service. I've got the cover for it. I've got a photocopy of the cover, but I've never been able to access it. If anybody knows anybody local, I know it's a long shot, but it's surprising what people have got tucked away.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anything's welcome. So watch this space anyway. You'll be getting your next newsletter out towards the end of the month before the next meeting. So our monthly meetings still continuing online for the foreseeable future. Anybody can give me an idea when we'll meet again? Anybody got a crystal ball? Ideas welcome for speakers, topics, local interest films. We'll keep scouting around as video collection to see what we can find. So anything like that would be useful. I've just been talking to Paul Gardner tonight from Hinckley and District, past and present, and he's going to do us a meeting in April. You know, he was going to come back to us anyway and do another one on probably around Old Hinckley or something like that. And he's got such a lot of information now on things like that, so he said he'll happily do us a Zoom meeting. So at least we'll get out to Burbage for that one. And the next meeting anyway is Thursday, February the 4th. They're always going to start at 7 o'clock while we're on Zoom, as we have if we were meeting. We're still having an AGM, so we'll still be electing a committee. And if anybody wants to stand for a committee or wants to volunteer to help, most welcome. So it'll just be a short AGM because I don't think we're going to have a lot to report, really, are we?
Just the losses.
Yeah, but hey, well, we've still got some things to do anyway. And that's going to be followed by the video, which I told you about last time. It's a lovely little video produced by the late Terence Wheatley in 2003, and it features music, the country fair, and the loveliest of trees with Terence Wheatley, who had a lovely baritone voice, and photographs and extracts from our dear John McNaughton's 2 Burbage books. And then Thursday, the 4th of March, this is going to be good. We're having a wander around Burbage in Tudor times with Joe Garner-Williams, all about people, houses, and fives. So I think we were a bit of an argumentative lot in Burbage. Hopefully we were anyway. So that should be interesting. And it's a period in history that we've not really covered much. So that should be really interesting.
Is this in fancy dress?
Sorry?
Is it in fancy dress?
Yeah, if you want. Yeah, get your doublet and hose out and your codpiece.
We thought they would.
That would be good. Yes.
Yeah.
The codpiece too big now.
Yeah, and we could all have a glass of mead, couldn't we, or whatever else they drank in those days, or small beer.
Mead.
Yeah. So tonight's meeting, food for thought with Sylvia Whitworth. So hang on, I'm just going to have a drink of water before I start. So it started off a few weeks ago as an article for our newsletter, but it kind of grew. And I thought I really got into it. And I thought, well, it's memories of shopping, gardening, food preservation and life. Well, basically growing up in the 50s and 60s. So as I originally, I wrote it as an article for the newsletter. You must forgive me if I actually sort of read some of it. So, food for thought. This, by the way, is not my mother's pantry or anybody I know. It's just a picture.
It's yours.
Off the internet. You can see it's rather grubby, little bits of it. But I'm sure there's a few articles that you might remember on there. Do you remember that? Was it Milo, that malted milk?
Yeah.
Well, I was having a look this afternoon, and milk, quickly dried milk, and what else we got? Celery soup. Don't see that much now. So there's quite a few of them that are still popular though. But I looked at this. I think this is probably from the 1970s. So anyway, it might jog a few memories to start with.
Has anybody got any of it?
Yeah, that's interesting.
We bought some Ravita today.
Oh yeah, rabbit. Well, that's it. We still got, the Heinz soup, and The yogurt dressing, that looks a bit grim, doesn't it? In a jar. What that is. But yeah, some of them are just repackaged, aren't they? And I think now as well, we have more supermarket brands, don't we? Whereas, you know, I suppose in the old days we stuck to the labels that we probably knew until price governed a few things. So, to put this talk into context,
Oh,
I guess I should say a little about my background. I was born in 1955, the youngest afterthought, put it polite, of the 4 children of Minnie and Bill Staten. There was a large gap between my eldest sister, who was 18 years older, and another one who was 16 years older, followed by my late brother, who was 10 years my senior. So as you can guess, I pretty much grew up as an only child, and I was perhaps fortunate not to experience the difficult times and shortages of the 30s and 40s of my siblings. I believe the name used for my generation is a baby boomer. Born in the early post-war years and grew up in the more financially secure and NHS-supported times of the 50s and the 60s. So by the time I was born, the family had lived for 4 years from 1951 in a newly built council house with a bathroom and 2 toilets. My sisters all like 2, yeah. My sisters said this was absolutely amazing, you know, after they'd been used to a 2 up and 2 down old stone house with lavvy down the garden, you know. The house stayed in our family right up to 2014 after the death of my father, when it was sold. And although we live near Chesterfield, Derbyshire, I hope that many of the things that I mentioned will be of a general interest to you. So this article really started whilst I was unpacking my online grocery delivery order recently, and I was reminded of the times as a child when I'd helped my mum unpack the weekly co-op delivery. We traded at the local co-op as we had a share account for the annual dividend, the divvy. Every purchase was accompanied by the share number, which was drummed into my head at a very early age. You know, I struggle to remember my mobile number, but I can still remember the co-op one, 8849. And also, it's interesting to know if your mother's divvy number, share number or anything was just 4 digits. It was one of the early ones. Apparently before that, the co-op used to issue tokens for the divvy, but they got to be a bit open to fraud. People started producing them because they were only made out of cheap tin. So that's when share accounts with the numbers were issued. I think it was about the early 1900s. So 8849. I can hear you all shouting out yours too, can I?
Yes.
321.
I believe that the divvy was a share of the profits. Now in Derbyshire it was paid out twice yearly, but apparently this varied to wherever you lived. It was a cash bonus, or you could take it in goods. This was based on what you'd spent. So for example, you got a shilling for every £1 you spent. The share could vary, of course, from time to time. I recall Mum once buying me a blue wool coat with the divvy.
We never had a co-op.
Oh, you were deprived. Probably southern.
No, we didn't have it. We're now in the south.
They're not many, were there? They were very.
Well, I suppose it started in Rochdale, didn't it, in Lancashire, and worked its way down the country. The word divvy was also used in the north to mean somebody behaving in a stupid way.
Oh, yes, it did.
A derogatory term, I suppose. The claim he's a right divvy comes from the idea of the dividend being a small share of the total. In other words, less than a full shilling. So the order arrived in a wooden fruit crate or a cardboard box, a fraction of the size of how many plastic bag delivery we get today. Mum's shopping list was considerably smaller. Perhaps flour, sugar, margarine, co-op leaf tea. It was always co-op 99. Cocoa powder, bird's custard, cheese for Dad's snap. That's a packed lunch to you Southerners.
What?
And oats or shredded
Cheese
wheat.
for Dad's snap.
Oh,
That's a packed lunch.
Snap, packed lunch.
yes, I know what a snap is.
Oh, you do, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes there were tinned peaches or pears, evaporated milk, tinned cream. You don't see that now, do you? And these items were reserved for Sunday tea, along with luncheon meat or John West salmon for sandwiches.
Oh, no.
Do you remember this? Oh,
What's happened?
What makes this can of salmon the best? These, the ones that aren't good enough. For John West, it's a fact that of all salmon canned, only 1 in 8 is really top quality. And it's only from this top quality that John West select their middle cut brand. Next time you buy salmon, and make it soon, remember it's the fish John West reject that makes John West the best. And that's true of skippers, crab, and all these fine products. Insist on the best and buy John West.
there.
Sunday
That was
teas at my grandma's.
blast from the past, yeah. And the red salmon was the best one, of course. And then you had pink salmon, didn't you? So in the summer, the salmon would be served along with a homegrown salad with lashings of Heinz salad cream. And I love the radish that Dad grew, especially the long white variety, icicle. Mum once asked me to pick some salad for tea. One tasty item I found was spring onions, which I thought Dad didn't grow. So I was quite pleased at finding some. No, Dad hadn't planted any spring onions. They were his young leeks just nicely coming up. Some people ate tuna, but this was soon dropped from our order when there was a scare in the early 1960s of large amounts of lead and mercury being found in the meat. I looked it up actually online and I see that there's a debate still going on some 50 years later to see if it's safe. Non-food items were CWS, that's Cooperative Society, household soap, and the odd bar of imperial leather for the bathroom. Isle toilet paper, which came in handy for tracing paper, especially when tracing maps for school.
We used to have the paper off the oranges.
Yeah, oh yeah, and school projects. And do you remember Jay's fluid was a disinfectant occasionally used?
Yeah.
I can't endure the smell. It reminds me of vomiting as a child.
I don't know what that is.
Packets of powdered robbing starch were occasionally used. Mum would mix up this strange milky substance and dip my sister's full underskirts, which were all the fashion in the late 50s. And Rackett's blue bags. They made the rinse water on the white laundry a brighter white. And I'm told these were also good for putting on bee stings to reduce the pain and swelling. I don't know what they had in.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that.
When I worked in a fish and chip shop, the owner would give the mushy pea pan a quick dip of the blue bag to bring out the green colour. It worked. And surprisingly, I never heard of anybody in Matlock Bath suffering from food poisoning.
Am I on the bottom list?
You were right along, but I've gone off since. I don't know what's happening.
Soda crystals, I believe, were used for washing dishes, but these were replaced by a strange smelling liquid named Fairy, which one my grandmother declared was so fine she washed her hair in it.
I always have. I always washed my hair wearing Fairy.
Yeah. We also had Persil wash powder, as Daz made my brother rich, despite him working with wood all day as an apprentice carpenter. The wash powder was a surprisingly small packet in those days for the weekly wash. Then, in 1958, my parents purchased a beast of a washing machine, which lived in the pantry and was pulled out on a Monday and attached to the taps in the kitchen. And a pair of large wooden tongs would be used to lift out the wet water.
One of them.
What with the
When I was about three, I recall sitting on the draining board watching Mum pushing the clothes through the electric mandrel attached to the top. Looking at the letters on the beast, I carefully sounded out the word hot point. Mum was so surprised at this child genius she had produced that the clothes got tangled up in the rollers along with her finger end. Not long after this episode, I was dispatched to the local council-run full-time nursery, and that's where I met my dear husband, Jeff.
Sylvia,
Excuse us, Sylvia.
can we have everybody muted? We're getting a lot of background chatting going on and we can't hear you.
Paul,
Yes,
can you mute everyone?
Yes,
How do
please.
you mute everyone? Hang on. More, stop video, join auto. Do. I don't know how you do it.
You mute yourself.
I can do
Paul
that.
should be able to.
That's
No.
it.
Okay.
Right, go on then.
If you can't mute yourself, keep quiet. So yeah, so as I say, we were dispatched to the local nursery. However, back to food. The weekly order was only a fraction of our food supply, and that would be supplemented by almost daily visits to the local shops for bread and meat. I can't move my thing. I don't know, I can't move it.
Not it. You'll
Yeah.
be all right then.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry about that. So the nearest local shop was Freyson's. Mr. Jack Freyson was a general grocer with some hardware. At the rear was his son's joinery business and builder's yard, where my brother worked as an apprentice. We purchased our daily bread from here, a white uncut loaf, which I was often sent to collect. Over the years, the shop became a small self-service, post office and drapers. However, they suffered from the competition of the newly opened Challenge supermarket, which had opened just across the way, and eventually Freyson's shut. If you look at this picture, the shop can be seen in the distant background. It was a wide, flat roof shop. You can see it right at the back there. If you're interested, the people who sat on the wall are the pensioners club of the Gold Miners pub, which is now incidentally a co-op. They were waiting for the coach to take them on their annual holiday to the Derbyshire Miners Welfare Holiday Camp at Skegness. This was paid for by the profits from a weekly tote. My Aunt Madge is second from the right, who was the St John's ambulance helper, accompanied the holidaymakers. She often said the excitement, rich food and cheap drink usually finished one of them off every year, and there was often an empty seat coming home. Mum and I also had a weekly Saturday morning visit to the town. That was Chesterfield. It was about a 2-mile bus ride where there was an excellent market. The market hall was a busy, crowded place where we always bought our Sunday joints of meat. Elliot's Butchers was a scary place with big carcasses of meat hung on hooks to the rear. The two Elliot brothers were big red-faced men covered in bloody striped aprons who wielded huge knives and were always chewing. Mum said it was the fat. I'm not sure whether she meant they were complaining or whether they were literally chewing the fat off the meat. Across from Elliot's was Dot's sweet stall full of jars of boiled sweets and other confectionery. Spoiled for choice, Mum would say. I like the blackjack, fruit salad or Mojo Chews. I think they were 2 a penny. They were made by the local sweet factory, Trebor. Jamboree or lucky bags were about 6pence. They consisted of a few sweets and a cheap toy. I always hoped for a ring. Mum said these were a waste of money, so I usually had a quarter, that's 113 gram, of pink and yellow boiled sweets in the shape of fish. They were supposed to last me a week, but usually I'd finish them by the time we got on the homeward bound bus. And it's nice to know that the store's still there, but now it's named Auntie Dot's and it's run by a nephew of the original Dot. The next stop would be the Home and Colonial grocers across the marketplace next to Boots Chemist. This had the most beautiful gold lettering on a black ground. Home and Colonial suppliers to the colonies This isn't actually the home and colonial at Chesterfield. I think it's somewhere in Scotland, but it's just the same. I think they must have had the same decor wherever you went. The shop was just like the ones that we now see lovingly created in some outdoor museum. The nationwide stores were established in the 1880s and they passed through various ownerships until the 1960s, when they were bought out by Safeway, who promptly rebranded the shops. I cannot remember what was purchased here, but it was another packed shop with lots of women jostling for a place at the counter. There were piles of loose butter and cheese that were weighed out and a large red meat slicer cutting bacon at an alarming rate. Cooked meats were carefully displayed in 4-ounce piles on pieces of greaseproof paper behind the glass-fronted, sneeze-guarded counter. Ham, ox tongue, salt beef, haslet, to name but a few. When we eventually reached the front of the queue, I would be pressed up against the chrome rail that protruded out of the counter. Apparently this was for resting the customers' bags on, but definitely not made for a child's nose. Occasionally we had lunch, or dinner as we called the midday meal, in town. A bag of chips from Bowden's fish and chip shop. This had a green and white tiled Art Deco interior and it was down a narrow alleyway. Mum's maiden name was Bowden, but she said they were no relation. She'd worked briefly there in the 1930s. Years later, she told me that she'd got the sack, dismissed, for kissing the boss's son. For years, she'd never go in the chip shop until after about 30 years, she plucked up courage, and who should serve her but the former Romeo. Fortunately, he was polite and didn't let on about the incident. Alternatively, lunch would be a hot pork and stuffing cob from Kirk's Butchers. This would be purchased with a pound of their famous tomato sausage for Saturday tea. It was the tastiest sausage, bright pink and salty. God knows what they put in it. Not like your artisan sun-dried tomato types you buy nowadays. And Jeff still sighs longingly at the memory of it. Occasionally we visited Woolworths for a pound of mixed biscuits. The biscuit counter again, with the child-unfriendly bag rail, had rows of deep tins, mainly Huntley and Palmer's, filled with biscuits of all descriptions and different prices. When I was 15, I had a job as a Saturday girl on that very counter. Oh, what delight, weighing out all the different types of biscuits. The cheapest were rich tea, arrowroot and pink wafers, and the most expensive were the chocolate-covered ones. We were allowed to eat a few broken ones if we bobbed down behind the counter. Some of my favourite fig rolls accidentally got squashed. They were quite hard to break up. Christmas was a good time for perks. We sold the hollow chocolate tree decorations and chocolate coins, which easily got broken. All this for £1 and 6p in the old money wages, less threatens for the national insurance stamp. My short retail came to an end in 1971 when Woolworths decided to make their shop self-service and all the Saturday staff were finished. And then it's nearly 50 years ago. On the 15th of February 1971, decimal coinage was introduced. The grandparents never really understood the concept, and Gran was convinced it was a plot to increase the price of food. After the shopping, it was back on the bus loaded up with Mum's oilcloth bags. I was often given a brown paper carrier bag with string handles that cut into little hands. I would anxiously look up to the sky in the hope it wouldn't rain and render the paper bag useless. There were no plastic carriers then. Have another drink. Milk was delivered by the co-op milkman. It was my brother's job to purchase milk tokens from the shop. And one of my earliest memories is being pushed in the old sit-up pram very fast down the hill to the co-op The more I screamed, the faster he pushed. They were carefully put in a twist of sugar paper, which I had to hold until we arrived home. The tokens were left out daily on the doorstep for the milkman. There were different coloured plastic tokens for ordinary pasteurised, Jersey or sterilised milk. And there was also one for the milk bottles of orange juice. The milkman once left the sterilised milk by mistake. It was awful, but it wasn't as bad as the one that Dad left out for the milk thief. This happened when Mum got a part-time job, and the milk would often be left out on the doorstep, and sometimes it went missing. Dad soon put a stop to this. He suspected a neighbour, so he filled a milk bottle with a mixture of Epsom salts and liquid paraffin emulsion and carefully replaced the foil top. This was left on the step instead of the milk order, and it was taken. We never again had our milk stolen. Oh, this is my dad on the right with the flat cap on. Dad could be quite devious. He often told the tale of the neighbour who they suspected was stealing coal out of their coal house. This was in the 1930s when times were hard. Dad had just got a job as a plate layer on the Midland Railway, so he obtained a small amount of point detonating powder. Dad got advice from the explosives man and carefully put a fraction of it into a piece of coal and filled the hole with wax. A couple of days later, the neighbour came running out of her house after the coal fire caused a bit of a mess. I don't know why he just didn't get a padlock. I think Dad was really a bit of a thwarted detective. He took evening classes so he could sit exams to apply to become a police constable. However, Hitler got in the way, and Dad had to stay in his essential job on the Midland Railway, where he remained for the next 40 years. Fortunately for the family, Dad was an avid gardener, and this picture is from the war years when Dad grew food in every available place he could. Also, this was when Mum, as a young housewife, learnt the ways of food preservation. When in 1951 the family were allocated a new council house, they specifically chose a corner plot with an extra large garden. And he also had 2 allotments, but sadly Dad could not raise poultry at a council house, so the geese and the hens had to go. However, Dad found a part-time job at the local farm, so we always had plenty of eggs. This is another picture from, well, you can see the dates. This is Dad again with the shunting pole to the right. His permanent job as a goods guard on the railway was a handy occupation for catching rabbits, and he would lay snares along the embankments. However, in the early 1950s, there was a terrible plague of myxomatosis among rabbits, which put the family off rabbits for life. In fact, I didn't try any rabbit myself until I was in my 20s. Our family were never short of fresh veg through all the seasons. In the winter, we had sprouts, parsnips and cabbage. My parents didn't have a fridge or a freezer until the early 70s, so the methods of storage would be the same as previous generations. Fortunately, we had an outhouse and a coal house, which Dad utilised to store everything. It was quite a big area as well. It was this on the right-hand side, and it was used for everything really. In the outhouse, onions would be flattened together and hung up along with marrows in nets. Mum hated peeling the old marrows as the skin grew tough as time passed. Large buckets of sand held carrots and beetroot, and a few potatoes were stored in sacks. Perfect unblemished apples were wrapped in paper and placed in boxes. And some of the apples were peeled, cored, thinly sliced and threaded on strings to dry. The rest of the apples were peeled and sliced and slowly dried in the back oven. which was warm from the sitting room fire, and peas were also dried this way. I don't think they had much success with these drying methods, and it was abandoned after a couple of years. But I do remember Mum buying peas in bags with a small tablet, which was apparently a type of baking powder. These were soaked overnight and cooked into mushy peas the following day. Oh, what a great day when tinned mushy peas were manufactured. Life became a lot simpler. An early memory I have is of the hot pea stall on a Saturday night in the marketplace at Chesterfield. As the stalls were cleared away, one was left out for the night pea stall. In the early 60s, I would have to go to one of these religious revival meetings at the Ragged School Chapel in Chesterfield. I think these were a spin-off from the American Billy Graham evangelical crusades of the time. Occasionally, I would be bribed by a promise of a visit to the pea stall on the way home to the bus. They were served in small greaseproof paper cups with an option of mint sauce. This was not so much a bribe as I would have preferred a visit to Auntie Dot's sweet stall in the closed market hall across the cobbles. And I've never come across this before anywhere else until I was speaking to my niece last night, and she said when she went to Nottingham Goose Fair a few years ago, there was a hot pea stall there. So whether it was a northern thing, I don't know. Dad enjoyed cheese and beetroot sandwiches. You know, even now when I boil fresh beetroot, but the aroma transports me back to our kitchen at Keswick Drive. Dad was very proud of his runner beans, and every year he would declare anybody who found string in his beans would be given £0.50, 12.5p. Try as I would, I never could find any. His tips for growing were plenty of water, and then when the flowers were out, he would spray the plants with a solution of golden syrup and water to attract the bees to pollinate. He'd never let the beans get old and pick them while young and tender. And apparently, when they were first introduced into this country, they were grown for the beautiful orange flowers. To preserve the beans, Mum would finely slice them and lay them between layers of salt in old stone jars. The salt was purchased in £14 bags from Salt and Shore wholesalers in Chesterfield. You can probably see my dad's bean row. It used to go up quite a long way around the garden. A family tradition was salted beans with our Christmas dinner. The beans had to be rinsed and soaked for about a day before being cooked in the normal way. Broad beans were another favourite. Mum would make a white sauce and serve them with boiled bacon. Jam jars would be collected throughout the year, and in the autumn they would be sterilised in a low heat oven while standing in a tin of water. As soon as it was blackberry season, we would be out in Dad's motorbike and sidecar to their favourite blackberrying spots in Derbyshire. Before her marriage in 1937, Mum had worked along with generations of the females of the family at the local jam factory, the Midland Preserve Company on Avenue Road near Chesterfield. My maternal grandmother, pictured on the left, told me about the mincemeat and plum pudding making times before Christmas. During World War I, food became short as there was no proper rationing system, and Gran's mother made her a type of poacher's bag under her skirts, where the dried fruit could be slipped through her skirt pockets that had been undone. When I look at this picture, I always think, was that the skirt? We also went on the moors for bilberries, which I love, but oh, they did take ages to fill even the smallest container. Dams and jam was another of Mum's staples, but she never quite managed to get all the stones out. Once I was greedily munching on some of bread and dams and jam, and I cracked a tooth. It was okay for the parents, they had false teeth. Much of the fruit was used in pies, which were always baked on a tin plate. No soggy bottoms to Mum's pies. Dad had a small orchard / growing area at the end of the garden, which backed onto the local school playing fields. He was always waging war with the kids who came scrumping. He put trip wires with trays of stones and broken glass on anything that made a noise, and he also played out with the local cats and dogs. He never had much success growing plums, but his black currants and raspberries and gooseberries were excellent. The birds were always a problem too. I had to make strings of shiny foil milk bottle tops on black cotton. And later in life, he was always asking the grandchildren for old CDs as bird scarers. This photo is the family stood under the William pear tree, which was a bit erratic at giving fruit. The conference pear tree always seemed to have the hardest fruit, and the fruit had to be put in the sock drawers to soften up. In later years, he was quite successful at growing pears, cordon style, where he laid the branches horizontally along supports. It was inspired after a visit to Wisley. Quite a bit of our garden produce would have adorned the Baptist Chapel Harvest Festival, where my parents were members. I love this time of year, in late September, when the chapel would be decorated with all the autumn produce. Dad would take bunches full of his chrysanthemums that he had sometimes lovingly protected from the elements with some kind of bright yellow waterproof bag around the blooms. I love the big tight blooms of yellow and white chrysanthemums in the Shoesmith range. One of my favourites was a white one, May Shoesmith. The chapel would be decorated on the Saturday, ready to receive the food gifts on the Sunday. One year, a number of the food gifts were bought on the Saturday, so these were put out ready. When Sunday arrived, Dad went to unlock the chapel to find a pile of destruction. Rats had eaten the lovely wheat sheaf harvest loaf and had taken the eggs and some of the fruits. This is a photo from 1962, and it was at the end of the service when the display was being distributed to the poor and needy of the village. Another autumn job was pickling onions. Dad would usually buy a sack of small onions from the Monday Bakewell market. These would have to be peeled with many tears in the eyes, then washed and covered with salt in big bowls. The following day, Mum would warm up vinegar with pickling spice, which filled the kitchen with a pungent smell that again stung the eyes. The onions, now placed in jars, were covered with vinegar and left to cool. I love Bakewell Market, to visit Bakewell Market with Dad and watch the sheep and the cattle sales. Dad had worked on farms as a young man, and he knew about the types of animals that were sold. The auctioneer spoke so fast, it amazed me how anyone ever knew if they'd won a bid. It was a proper farmer's market, with produce being bought and sold throughout the year. The cheese stall was one of Dad's favourites, where the owner would slice off a sliver of anything he fancied for a taste sample. Rhubarb was another early crop. Dad had two varieties. I remember one was named Champagne. For years I thought the drink was produced from this pink stick. I could never understand why the parents enjoyed this so much as they were teetotal. When the rhubarb started to show its crown and up popped its small curled leaves, Dad would place large worn-out galvanised buckets with holes in the top to force the rhubarb to grow straight and thin. Sometimes I'd have a bag of sugar and dip the rhubarb stick in as a snack. Surprisingly, I've still got most of my own tea. In winter, Dad would get seed catalogues from the main seed suppliers, and we'd spend hours poring over them looking for new things to grow. One year, he decided to grow a passion flower, which eventually was trained around the French windows. Dad was quite taken up by this religious symbolism of the flower, but Mum less so. The vine-type stems were the ideal place for birds to perch and mess on the windows. Eventually, after Mum decided nothing could be done with this strange yellow hollow fruit, Dad was persuaded to take it down. In 1961, Dad purchased a greenhouse. It was his pride and joy after years of managing with cold frames. He mainly grew tomatoes and cucumbers and germinated all the annual plants, some of which he sold. It was heated with a paraffin greenhouse heater that was aluminium with 2 double burners. By the age of 10, I was allowed to take the paraffin can and fill it at the pink paraffin pump machine at the side of Fairstone shop. I think it cost a shilling or 2. Be careful not to spill any or lose the coins. No problem that your child's carrying a can full of highly inflammable liquid home. Recently, I found a similar vintage heater on eBay for £40, which was the total cost of Dad's first greenhouse. In February 1962, we awoke one very windy morning to find the greenhouse completely collapsed and every piece of glass shattered. You know, I can still remember my dad's face when he walked round the back after a night shift to find this sight. And I also remember Mum telling one of the neighbours they'd just finished paying for it, so I guess they bought it on credit. The gale had been one of the worst in history. It had left a trail of destruction, uprooting many ancient trees in nearby Chatsworth Park. However, Dad replaced the greenhouse and eventually he had 2 aluminium ones. Even in his 90s, he still potted about in the greenhouse and he was always happy growing things. The pantry always seemed full in the autumn, with many jars stored on the top shelves, which gradually moved down to the lower ones as the seasons changed. There was a thrall in the pantry, a large stone or perhaps concrete shelf, which was a cool place for storing dairy produce and any food that needed to be kept cool. And underneath was the ever-hungry electric meter, which had to be fed a daily diet of shilling pieces. I also remember Mum telling me about egg preservation in isinglass, which was used in World War II. Being born after the war, I never saw this method being used, but I don't think Mum had much success with it. Little would I know that some 60 years later, the Heritage Group would unveil a plaque at Burbage Hall to Kinard Bagot de la Vere, who discovered a use for this strange jelly-like substance. Many happy days were spent with the children and later all their 9 grandchildren in Dad's garden. Some of the love of gardening has been passed down along with memories of Mum's preservation techniques. When I was talking to my daughter last night, she said it was never a pretty garden, but it was a working garden. So I like to think of it that way. By the early 1970s, my siblings and I had all left home, and my parents purchased a fridge and a chest freezer that replaced the old thrall. The beast of the hot point washer was replaced by a plumbed-in automatic washing machine in Dad's storage outhouse, which was then named the utility room. Sadly, these also replaced the old ways of preserving food. Mum had learned had to learn new skills of blanching, bagging and freezing the garden produce. However, for many years, Mum still did a jar of salted beans for Christmas dinner. And one advantage of all this, Dad gave up the allotments and filled more of his large garden, growing his beloved sweet peas and dahlias. That's it, thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you.
Good. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a bit personal, but you know,
yeah,
I'm sure it
Lovely.
reminded you a lot of things.
Was.
Any questions?
Well, just say about your peas. You used to be able to get peas in a basin at Yarmouth in the marketplace.
Oh,
used to build
right.
quite a few trailers.
Yeah.
Trailers.
Yeah.
And we always used to look forward to going and have a basin of mushy peas
All right.
and mint sauce.
Yeah, there you go.
I
I
don't
think
know
it
if it's still
perhaps that was where it originated then, perhaps right around the fairgrounds and that, like my niece
probably.
said.
I don't know, but
Yeah,
they
yeah.
were there for years when we were kids. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Anybody else?
No, I don't think so.
Is Anne talking? Anne?
Yeah, she's not muted.
I can't, you're on mute. Oh, dear, yeah.
You're still muted.
You're still muted, Anne.
She's not talking.
Yeah,
Oh,
There you go.
1963, I worked at a company called Castleoid in Leicester,
Hmm.
and that fairy liquid bottle was made by Castleoid.
Oh, right.
That was the beginning, the innovation of the squeezy bottles for for washing up liquid in particular, and then all the plastic tubes. That was called a process called tuboplast.
Hmm.
And fairy liquid was always used as a test for the machinery, because it was always the strongest of the washing up liquids on the market at the time.
Hmm. All right.
It used to jam the machinery up something terrible. It had awful problems with them. Yeah.
So that's another thing that Leicester produced that I never knew.
Yeah. Well, the plastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they made all sorts of plastic bottles. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Printing
interesting.
them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Innovative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bob, Sue?
Yeah.
It is when I used to work in the Cotswolds. I was taught how to string the onions, and I still do it today. When we've got,
That's good. Yeah. It's no, I've not seen that done for years. I suppose it's still people do these things, just little elements of what we used to do, I suppose. Especially if you've got an allotment or anything. Joe?
Yeah.
You reminded me when I saw the salted beans. My mother used to have very large stone jars, and I think runner beans, were about the only thing that Dad was any good at. And I remember spending hours when I was a kid having to slice these things and then put salt in them. And they were huge. They were absolutely huge, these jars, and they used to last us for the entire winter.
I bet they must have been very similar to my mum. There was a local potters called Pearson's Pottery. They were quite a famous pottery, and they produced the Derbyshire stoneware.
That's probably it.
And mum from when mum had worked there, and she'd got all these old stone jars. But I do remember you could get mincemeat in smaller ones, couldn't you? Do you remember?
I don't remember that.
Yeah. I could still remember that, but they're what mum used to use. I don't know how many pounds of mincemeat would be in them, but they're what mum used to use. Yeah. And I used to love. I think it was the saltiness, but they took ages to. I know she used to soak them all night to get the salt out.
Yeah.
But, I could taste them now. Yeah. Always bad for you, of course.
Going back to onions, I can remember after the war, the French onion sellers used to come up certainly as far as Leicester. They'd come on their bikes, they'd come on the train.
Strike jerseys.
With that, yeah.
That's it.
With the onions over the crossbars.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah. Used to come on the street selling onions.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Right, as you can see.
Sue has got her stone jar, I can see.
Sue, that's the sort I mean. Yeah.
Well done.
Oh, yes. That's it.
Has it got a mark on the bottom?
Got something inside it.
Oh, right.
No, I've got two.
Yeah.
It has, but it's not readable.
No.
No, it just looks like an initial.
Yeah.
It says WPH on the bottom.
All right.
So whether that's the
stone jars, isn't it?
person that made it.
When I do pickled pears, again a recipe I got from the Cotswolds.
Wow.
And I put them in, and it's just bare pears that you put in vinegar and syrup and things. And over the winter, the moisture almost evaporates out the crock pot, so it goes thick and syrupy.
Oh,
it's very
right.
nice. Anyway,
Yeah. So that's useful. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? No other comments. Yeah.
Oh, just say about the sweets. You've got them tree ball sweets, but that's Robert backwards.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. They were apparently Roberts were bombed out. Well, I think they were North London.
Yeah.
They were bombed out in the war, and they came to Chesterfield for some reason and built a factory near the station at Chesterfield. And it's Robert backwards tree ball, and they're not there now in Chesterfield, but tree ball it's still used, isn't it? It's still a name because they do the mints, don't they, and things. Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to use that picture though now, would you?
No, it wasn't very PC.
Not that up to date.
That's one of the reasons I put it on. Yeah, but we can probably tree ball mints. A mint a bit stronger, all this advertising that sinks into your brain when you're young and impressionable.
As a child, I used to collect all those off the jam jars with the gollywogs on.
Oh, the gollywogs.
Was that Robinsons?
Yeah.
Robertsons. Robertson gollywogs. Yeah.
Very.
John's phone.
Is he causing trouble again? Yeah, you could collect them. Yeah.
Perhaps I should apologise for saying that word now, should I? I don't know.
No, because we all understand it.
Yeah, we all know, don't we?
I think you had to save 10, didn't you? I think it was 10, and then you could send them off for a metal brooch. Yeah, and they had all different characters, didn't they? Playing instruments. You pay about a £5 for one of them badges now.
Sure you
see them anywhere. Bob again.
My mum had all the musicians.
That's right. That's it.
She had a set of about 4, 5, 6. I can't remember, but I know she had a set.
Yeah.
We've still got 2 sets.
Have you? Oh,
yeah, Mark's got a set and Dale's got a set, and they're up our loft in a box. And they're all little ornaments, all in colour.
That's right. Yeah, you could get that. Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
And they also did
worth some money.
Yeah, they also did some. They did the lemons and the oranges, didn't they, for the marmalade?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Silver shred marmalade and that. I think they're probably a bit more rare.
They did the sports series as well, all sports collies.
That's right, they did. I remember
the hockey player and etc.
That's it. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Yeah.
Going back to the Divi book, Sylvia.
Yeah.
You know where the Burbage funeral parlour is now?
Yeah.
Well, there's a little door at the side there that used to go up to the dancing class.
Yeah.
Well, that's where you used to have to go to have your Divi book signed.
Right.
And when Alan and I got married, we joined the co-op. And when Mark was born, I drew the money out and we bought a Silver Cross pushchair for £46.
Wow.
The Divi money.
I will have it. What was your number, Janet? What was your number?
1410-4, still in here.
Oh, that was a 5-digit number. Yeah. Yeah.
5776 was my mother's.
But of course, I think it must have been. Was it about the early 70s when Divi finished, and they brought those stamps out, didn't they?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And you filled a book up, and you got £1 back or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, now I've still got a share card at the
I've still got.
But I forget to use it. And
we've got our co-op.
Yeah.
Books. Yeah.
And I know just before Christmas, I got some I got some message on my email, and I could have a free coffee.
Using the
If I flash my card or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. Joe did.
Happy days.
Happy days. Yeah. Yeah. But
That was a lovely walk down memory lane, Sylvia.
yeah, it was. Yeah, I really enjoyed doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it
Sylvia,
was,
you mentioned Bakewell Market.
Yeah.
On the route, and we took an interest in Bakewell. When we went camping in Derbyshire, primarily because we found on Bakewell Market Day the pubs were open all day.
Yeah.
Which is a tradition that's long since gone, of course, these days, where we're used to pubs being open all day.
Yeah.
But,
the Red Lion was a good one next to the bridge. I like the Red Lion. Yeah.
do you recognise this picture?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Bakewell Market's in the background there, Sylvia.
Yeah, that's Bakewell. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I do. Yeah. I've got numerous pictures of the family kids feeding the ducks. Yeah. It was always a thing you did. I've not took my grandchildren there yet though. And there's a bridge further down because now they built a new market, cattle market over the bridge. So just down to the left of this photo, there's a bridge, and you go over into the new. They have the Bakewell show every year as well. Yeah, and it's one of those bridges that's got all padlocks on. You know that people put padlocks on.
Oh right, yeah.
Reason, yeah. But yeah, happy days.
The lady in the fawn coat in the middle of the picture there is Gladys Barker, who was one of the town's traffic wardens for a short period. She lived in Britannia Road with.
Oh yes, we knew Gladys.
Yeah.
Yeah, we knew Gladys. Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah.
Brown.
Used to come to our church. Yeah.
Yeah. They still have a market on a Monday, as far as I know. They did about 3 years ago when we went. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, lovely.
Well, as you related your childhood, I'm sure it made us all relate to our own childhood because we could imagine things.
Yeah. Well, I know this was JR again. I know when he used to edit the newsletter a few years ago, I know some of you did write pieces. I know Cynthia, I remember you did a lovely piece. Perhaps we'll have to sort of dig some out again.
Yeah.
And also Irene R, she did a good piece about her grandfather's tailor's shop that was on Church Street, and Kathleen Robbins, she did one. I know we had a few memories of it'd be great if anybody, or even if you just did one little bit, like you remember like the co-op, like Jan's memory of just getting the divvy and buying the pushchair with it, something like that. It's anything like that. And it's surprising what pictures you can find nowadays on the internet if you have a look round. Yeah. So right, well, that's been lovely. I've enjoyed doing that anyway. So
well done, thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.